So the thought of adventure just set in, and the confidence of having rode a bike for basically 3 months kicked into the idea that I have to have an adventure bike. Now, seeing everybody load up their bike and, you know, be able to go on a camping trip, go cross country, go hit a couple of trails, naturally I said, okay, I gotta have this too. But it may have been the worst idea as a new rider to get into this, and I'll tell you why. When you're lower to the ground, have a lower seat height in what I currently ride in my Harley 1200 Iron, get a false sense of confidence that, okay, the bike is easy to maneuver, you know, it's manageable power, it's a 1200, of course it's manageable power, but one thing you don't realize is that there's so much more to learn in controlling a bike and maneuvering it than just being able to plant your feet down firmly on the ground when you're at a stoplight, or be able to navigate it doing, you know, a snail's pace crawl in a parking lot. Then you get into bikes like this, where you have basically a sports bike that's been modified on, I don't know, like a dual sports frame, you know, like a bigger tank, a lot higher seat, and, you know, with that, a couple of things to consider is the center of gravity moves up as well. BMW did a great job on keeping the weight down. I believe roughly 505 pounds wet and ready to ride on this thing. This is a 2021 F850 GS, and it's, you know, it's a phenomenal bike. It's a parallel twin 840 some odd cc engine, making somewhere in the 94-95 horsepower range, and, you know, something in the realm of just shy of 70 foot-pounds of torque. But, you know, that's still manageable power, I would think. It's not, you know, it's not extraordinarily fast. It is an aggressive bike. It's kind of fun to toss it around, and if you get on the throttle, it does like to get up and go. The downfall of the virgin rider, that being me, and literally the downfall, is being able to manage a bike this big and tall. Now, again, my inseam's somewhere about the 32 inches, and this seat sits just at around 34 inches tall. Any type of slow speed maneuver that I need to do, especially if I need both of my feet to support me, I'll be doing it on my tippy toes. And recently I learned, and again, this is amateur mistakes, I learned that you don't just smash the front brake if somebody just walks right in front of you at a gas station. And unfortunately, in doing so, I unsettled the bike and got unsettled. The bike started leaning, and it was too late for me to save it. So I did what any sensible person would do. I hopped right off it and let it fall. It was a slow enough maneuver, and it was a slow enough instance of the bike tipping over where I was able to afford to hop off of it, as opposed to get potentially crushed underneath it. And you know, hurt my back picking it up. It's the first bike I've ever picked up off the ground, but proud of myself. I did it the right way. I faced away from it and lifted it with my back. And, you know, bikes like this, they're not really friendly to the entry-level guy, that being me. I have a great friend at BMW here locally at the Burbank store, where I was able to get a great deal on this bike. I bought it brand new as a dealer demo. They basically ride it around for a couple of 100 miles. BMW loads their pockets or greases their palms with a little bit of marketing cash. I was able to get about $1,000 off of this bike. It's off of its, you know, $17,000 price range. And it was kind of nice because I'd recently done the motorcycle safety course, and BMW, I guess, has a program. If you complete it and you go and buy a bike from them, they just reimburse you for it. And to top it off, at the time I got it, they also had an incentive where, because you did that, you also get an additional $500 worth of store credit for gear, safety gear. You Yeah, it all sounds exciting on paper until you realize that one single ADV jacket with, you know, some protection, some armor built in is still going to cost you out of pocket, because it was $5.99. I ended up paying $100 out of pocket for that, and that was the only piece of protection that I was able to squeeze my $500 credit for. But that aside, I mean, a bike like this is not gonna be a good first, second, third, or fourth choice for the beginner rider. And you know, I can only speak for myself. I'm 31. I started riding 7 months ago, and like a complete idiot, unguided, you know, virgin mind in the two-wheel world, I went ahead and bought a starter bike. Got the Z125 Pro from Kawasaki. It's small, it's not intimidating, you know, it's kind of tame in power. It has no power, but learned on that bike, grew out of it within 8 days. I taught myself how to basically figure it out, walked with the bike, learned the clutch, etc., etc. Again, not an intimidating bike. It's small, it's light, it's maneuverable. 7, 8, 9, 10 days, whatever it took, it basically was under 2 weeks. I sold the bike, sold it privately, and the nice thing is, in this climate, with where the market is as far as goods go, just any type of general goods, whether it's vehicles or, you know, appliances, I didn't lose much money on my Z125 Pro, so, you know, just wrote off the taxes, all $320 of it, and decided to look into something bigger but still tame. Ended up with the G310R. Fantastic bike, great bike, but far from BMW, besides some styling cues and a couple of quality items. Had that for a while, and I think after 3 or 4 weeks I grew sick of it because I couldn't get on the highway, and I thought I was ready for the highway. So said, okay, what's the most sensible thing to do that's not going to look cliche? Let's get a Harley. And ended up with my Iron 1200. Now, it didn't take until I bought this bike, this BMW F850 GS, where I started appreciating the Harley Davidson. I still have that bike. I love that bike. It's a different outlook once I've experienced something like this, where basically this BMW has things that I didn't know motorcycles should have. Apparently it's fairly common. Things like phone connectivity, you know, like you got this whole Bluetooth navigation thing that puts directionals and, you know, commands at you in the little TFT screen that BMW gives. This TFT screen is filled with just nonsense, right? Like, I think I got stuff like this in my car where I got telephone media, you know, well, this one, at least I would say the vehicle information is pretty useful because it gives you all kinds of data on the bike itself. You know, you got a couple of long-term trip computers. You got TPMS, which I'm sure would come in very handy in your every morning check to make sure that you're riding a safe bike and not, you know, not just hopping on it like a car and going at it. But also, I'm sure it comes into a lot of use when you start going off-road and, you know, hitting a trail or two, which I have yet to do in this bike. And I thought I'd get a little comfortable with it after a couple of days. I'm gonna hit me a trail and see what it's like. But, you know, 2 months later, I'm still getting used to the bike, and it's unfortunate that this is the way it penciled out, but it's a learning curve, you know. And when you're not guided by, you know, I don't have a lot of motorcycle rider friends, and the ones I do, you know, obviously they got their own lives, they're busy, they got kids, they got families. They're not gonna sit there and talk bikes with me after they've done it for a couple of decades. And yeah, it's a learning curve to do this. It's not, you know, you don't just hop on a bike, learn how to ride it, get comfortable with your balance, and call it a day. This takes a lot of time and effort and learning. Like, you have to be open to learning. And on an F850 GS, man, like, you know, on that 1200, I feel 100% confident most of the time. You know, I'm sure there's a lot to learn on it, but then you get on a bike like this where you feel like you're still, you know, complete amateur after a couple of months. It's just a lot to absorb. It's a lot to learn. you know, it's a high center of gravity, and I just stalled it. It's a high center of gravity, and you know, it's tough to maneuver something like this at a slower speed and tighter turns when you don't have the know-how or the confidence to basically be able to complete minor tasks, if you might want to call it. The other things the bike comes loaded with, and again, it's some crazy stuff. You got cornering ABS, BMW calls it ABS Pro. You got just normal ABS where, you know, you can slam on the brakes and not fear locking it up, not fear your rear giving out, sliding, potentially high siding you, and you know, in an emergency situation. You got things like just shy of Apple CarPlay. Your phone is pretty much integrated in here. You connect it to your whatever helmet device you end up getting. As long as it's got Bluetooth, they all talk to each other. I got things like dynamic ESA, electronic suspension adjustment, which it lets you basically tweak the preload on it. And this button right here lets you go from solo to 2-up, where you can basically adjust the preload at the push of a button for carrying a passenger. I got cruise control on this thing. Now, BMW even goes as far as putting adaptive cruise control on their cruisers, and well, at least the R18 on their R18 Transcontinental. There's a couple of other brands out there that do adaptive cruise control, where you literally have a radar, you know, eye just sitting right in front of the bike above the headlight, and it'll just keep pace with the car, just like today's, I don't want to go as far as saying Tesla, but your average car with adaptive cruise control. I got things like, I don't know, the 4 riding modes, 2 of which you get standard, road and rain. Road is pretty, is a pretty comfortable, throttle mapping and suspension setup. Then you got rain, where it really tames it out, where you have to just put in some effort to even get the bike going, but it does it on purpose so you don't, you know, potentially lose traction and start skidding just by opening the throttle when the ground's wet. And then part of the package that I have, which is the premium package, but I believe you also get this in the select package with the F850 GS, you're going to get 2 additional modes. You're going to get dynamic and enduro. Enduro is where it really starts messing with the traction control and the stability control, and makes the bike a little bit more off-road friendly. It helps it, you know, get out of a rut, if you want to call it that. It allows the wheel to slip without traction, so you can get through some dirt. I've never tried it, I've never turned it on. And then you got dynamic, which just really aggressively maps the throttle. Dynamic, I believe, also adjusts the suspension to its stiffest, most sporty setting. And it's a, you know, it's a blast. You look at a bike like this, it's tall, it's gigantic, it looks goofy as all hell. It's a complete nerd's bike. But then you open the throttle and it just flies on you, right? It's got, again, 90 horsepower. It doesn't sound like a lot, but my Volkswagen Taos had 170 horsepower, and it weighed more than 7 times the weight of this bike. And that was a pretty quick car, you know. Again, it's not a sports car by any means, but in comparison to its 170 horsepower, you know, on paper it sounds like not a lot, until you actually get on it. That car is capable of highway speeds. It could maintain 100 miles an hour if you, I'm sure, if you gave it a shot. I wouldn't know, I'm not that ballsy. But this guy, you know, open the throttle, get up to 4th gear, you're doing 90-95 miles an hour on the highway, and you know, you don't feel any of it. That's the biggest plus of owning a bike like this, is you get spoiled with basically a transcontinental cruiser, whatever you want to call it, you know, like a cross-country bagger bike's comfort and you know, amenities, but with the ability to just, you know, in a split second you could just put it in the dirt and make it do things that, you know, $6,000, $8,000 specialized dirt bikes are doing, or motocross bikes, or whatever those bikes are. I've never been on one, so I wouldn't know. And this is a good medium between having a touring bike and a dirt bike, and it saves you from having to tow and, you know, tow and transport your dirt bikes to the road, because you just get on the highway with this thing. It's 100% street legal. And, you know, the other argument is getting a dual sport. A dual sport, To me, again, I have a virgin mind. I don't know what a dual sport is. To me, it looks like a dirt bike with a license plate where there are no amenities. There's no creature comforts. And a lot of dual sports are about half the price of this bike, which, you know, is justifiable. But you buy one of those and you end up wanting a touring bike too. You're coughing up money for a touring bike, and touring bikes aren't cheap. You got bikes like the Harley, you know, whatchamacallit, the glides, the sport glide, street glide, road glide, whatever those are. Those are, you know, $30,000 bikes. By the time you're done with Uncle Sam, you could potentially break it into the 40s. And the same thing with the BMW R18, you know, the Suzuki, I think it's called a Gixxer GT or something. That type of touring bike. You got the K1600s, the Honda Goldwings. Those are all above $20,000, guys. Like, you can go buy yourself a pretty decked out car for less than that. I had a Volkswagen Jetta for $21,000. The thing came with LED lights, Apple CarPlay, you know, power windows and keyless entry and keyless push start. It's hilarious, but you're getting into car territory. Something like this, you could kind of double it, you know, like you can have a touring bike underneath you. You have technically you have a sports bike underneath you that can be a touring bike and a dirt bike, and it's worth all the money that, you know, to me it's worth all the money I spent on it, minus the timing. This was the wrong time for someone like me, a virgin, you know, motorcycle rider, to go out and buy a bike like this. I think it takes a few years of skill and, you know, development before you can start to maneuver a bike this tall, this big, you know. Power wise, again, it's tame, it's, you know, it's friendly. It doesn't seem to be intimidating, you know. It's not your, I don't know, R1 or, you know, Gixxer 1000 or Hayabusa. It's got plenty of you know, civility to it. Anyways, it's a solid bike. I love everything about it, you know. Ease of entry into the whole ADV riding is a whole different story, and that probably shouldn't be in a video like this where I just ramble on about everything I love about the bike, hate about the bike, and regret about buying with the bike. Getting into ADV is getting into the ADV style of riding. I mean, you're looking to cough up some money, you know. Aside from your safety gear, just storage. This little box behind me that, you know, I think Vario makes, at Vario Top Case, that's what it's called, for BMW. This thing was like $700. I don't even have the side cases, so, you know, as a complete set, I wouldn't be surprised if after Uncle Sam you come up to $2,000 for the whole set. And you know, now you're back up in the road glide territory, and we're not even talking about tents. We're not talking about, you know, other tank bags and this and that and whatnot, all kinds of, you know, that stuff, so to speak. Love the bike. I'm really enjoying it. It's a lot of fun, and, you know, kind of pricey, but worth the money. Just, if you're a beginner, take this from a beginner, misguided or unguided beginner. This is not a bike to toy with until you have some, you know, some seat time or, you know, a little bit of experience underneath your butt. These things are not as easy as I thought it would be in comparison to whatchamacallit, a 30-inch seat height cruiser that is slow, it's tame, it's manageable, and it's loud. Everybody knows you're coming. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope you liked this video, and I apologize if I rambled on too much. Cheers.